Greetings, this is Earth Faith here. The name of this program is Mr. Speaker, yet I speak for myself. The topic here is China with the COVID protest and the adjustment by the Chinese government of the COVID restrictions and, the change in policy. What will that mean for the protest in China and for the overall configuration of China, all the issues around with the politics of China. So let's get started. First and foremost, let us understand this zero COVID policy. Basically, there's an apartment building. There's, one or two or three people who, probably give each other COVID. It gets detected. That means one person gets tested positive. They find other people with COVID in the apartment building. Now, then basically they burn down the apartment building to prevent the spread of COVID. This has been the Chinese procedure from the beginning with COVID. Anywhere they find COVID, they go in, they burn down the house, and they had at times reported zero COVID in China. But that wasn't the truth. Obviously, a lot of people, they slip through the cracks, they let them go, whatever. So there is widespread COVID untreated in China. Now, with the protests, basically the protesters, you can assume they all have COVID, and that's why they're protesting. They can't even see the doctor because the doctor will just do them in. So there's been a new China policy, but this is not zero tolerance. This is dynamic zero tolerance policy. And this was captured in a video interview where the Chinese spokesperson, was at a loss of words, and he came up with this phrase, now we have a dynamic zero COVID policy. That means now we go out and we get them at the protest. We pick these people up, and then, basically we do them in, we kill them. That's basically what the Chinese government is doing to its people if they're testing positive for COVID. Now, here's the problem for China. What's at stake? Of course, there's Chairman Xi. He could just lose his job. So he wants to get rid of all these protesters. Will he succeed? This depends on the response of the Chinese people. You've got at least 1 million to 10 million protesters. These people are already guilty of protesting. You could say half of them probably have COVID. There's no forgiveness for COVID in China. This zero tolerance policy continues. It's now a dynamic zero tolerance policy. That means we're going to go out and get them. We're not going to wait for them to show up at the doctor's office. Now, what does it mean for the United States? Of course, we've been threatened with nuclear weapons from China for the last 5 years, basically North Korea, which is an extension of China. Now, it's more than that. With the war in Ukraine, basically all the cards are on the table. All bets are off. Basically everybody is all in. What's at issue for the United States is communism itself. There have been whispers in China. We hate our authoritarian system of government. We don't like our system of government, which is Chinese communism. But Russia is not in a much better position with the war in Ukraine. And Ukraine, I'll tell you, is a never-ending war with Russia. There is no incentive for compromise because it's just going to be an extension of the question of communism versus capitalism. And, basically it'll just be another Cold War. So basically there's no way to, basically you can have a truce like we did with Korea, but that'll be, a future consideration. Right now, with the uncertainty of what is the Chinese government going to do to its protesters, and then how will the Chinese people react if the government wipes out, 1 million, 5 million, 10 million people for protesting, presumably under the auspices of COVID. Russia also, basically because of Crimea. Now, Crimea is of strategic interest to Russia. They can't live without it. Yet, they can never hold on to Crimea. Crimea is in some strange place where Russia needs Crimea, but they can never hold on to it for very long without a conflict. So basically, at issue for the United States and the Western world is, the end of communism altogether is on the table. And the West will not be willing to help China out in humanitarian ways with their protesters. If China wants to crack down on its protesters, there's nothing the United States can do to stop the Chinese government from killing their own people, and they feel justified. They really feel that they have the best policy to safeguard China. We cannot change their mind about their COVID policy. They've moved from a zero COVID tolerance policy to a dynamic zero tolerance policy. That means we're going to go out and get these protesters. It's going to be up to the Chinese people to win their freedom, just like Ukraine. If they want to be part of the Western alliance, then, that will be up to Ukraine. Now, how about me? I'm from India. India is a neutral country like Switzerland because it's caught between Russia and China. There's been British colonists and Western invaders over the years. The issue with India is just like Switzerland. It's its physical location. It's unlikely to change its military neutrality because it can neither defend its own borders nor can it stop these invaders from all sides from coming in. Now, if India should somehow change its mind and become pro-Western, well, then from the American point of view, that'll be it. That will open so many possibilities for the West to use India as a launching pad against China and Russia. Now, India, I'm not involved in Indian politics, but basically India would come under attack by Russia and China if it would open its doors to American soldiers to use India as a launching pad. But basically, I will tell you, as far as communism is concerned, it's on the table in China and in Russia. This is the final issue for the Chinese people and the Russian people to decide, whether they want to remain communist countries. And it was, I tell you, I live in California, Bakersfield, California, of all places, and it was not something that we were discussing. We're always talking about how to, minimize this. Kevin McCarthy is our representative. He doesn't even want to put money into the Ukraine war because, he'd rather find a way to do business with China and Russia. But basically, this is not something that was even slightly expected. It's, kind of like a Christmas present for us that China and Russia, communism is collapsing in China and Russia. Earth Faith here, signing off.